Karen, did you know the veterinarian in Boone, Doug Gustafson, when you guys lived there?
I didn't know.
He owned Boone Veterinary Clinic. He just died this weekend of COVID. And he had his first shot.
You had what?
He had had his first vaccination.
Because we have one here.
How old was he?
He's retired. He's got to be in his 80s. All Kobe's friends from high school, all their dads are dying of COVID.
Are we going to be on the phone? Is B going to be on the phone or not at all?
On the phone, I think.
Okay.
Mike's not coming.
That's what Barron said. Yeah, no mic.
Hopefully one more person shows up. So, I would guess that be attending via phone counts as a quorum.
That would get us to a quorum, wouldn't it?
Yeah, does that, if you're attending virtually, does that?
I think it does.
So is it the next meeting you're going to
She can vote, right?
No, that's the
Participate,
second
yeah.
April.
Second one.
I'll be in Hawaii.
Nice. Although. It's been kind of disappointing for them. They're at Maui.
Okay.
It's been raining.
Oh,
Second week, so with the restrictions and stuff that they got on everything, because it's like cool, like that, we have the chairs out. People are literally getting up at like 5 in the morning, don't stay there. Spot.
that's so frustrating.
And they're being told, leave their spot.
So don't go get in the water or anything. Oh my God.
Where are you guys going?
We're going to Kona.
Oh, short periods. Mostly just
Okay, yeah. That's where we stayed last time. That's where I would stay back too. I know. Sorry, it's so bad.
I think a big part of it is that he said it's rained a lot.
That would be hard.
It was rain.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah,
They're
that
a
might
big golfing family, and I think he said they were once or twice the first week, a little over a week, as they were
Okay. So that's kind of frustrating. Figuring out what to do
Yeah.
indoors.
Do you want to sign this since you're the one here tonight?
Can.
have you sign these resolutions also, since you're the one here.
Aaron, I tried to put 8 o'clock works for me, but Google keeps trying to fix it, and they send it to you incomplete. Right.
But that's okay.
Yeah, anyway, it is okay. Yeah, it just,
I feel like you're so far away.
well, it did that thing where it says, I start to put in 8 o'clock.
If she needs to talk, would be when.
And then you erase half of it. And then I go on again. You erase
Hello. Hi, B. This is Amy calling you.
I don't know.
Okay. Okay, so you're on and we're good to go. And if you need to speak, just say something and Dr. Schutte can kind of slow us down and put his microphone to you.
I can't hear you very well.
Okay, if you're a little delayed in watching this, so if you want to add something or speak, then just say it and Dr. Schutte will hear you and then he can microphone the speakerphone.
Okay,
Okay? Thank you.
all right.
If you want to mute your microphone while you're not speaking so that we can't hear the background noise, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
I'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
I'll do that.
Recently enough, right?
Okay, if you're a little late in watching this, so if you want to add something or speak, then just say it. We'll hear you and then.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, if you want to mute your microphone while you're not speaking, so that.
All right, well, you've got pretty good at banging the gavel. Good evening. Welcome to the regularly scheduled Marshalltown Community School District School Board meeting for March 15th, 2021. We're all here. I guess most of us are here. Welcome to those of you here. Welcome to those of you watching us on the live stream or on delayed broadcast. Let me introduce the folks joining us here at the board table. To my right is Karina Hernandez. To my left is Jan McGinnis and Sarah Faltis. Here at the center table with me is Paulette Newbold, the board secretary, Dr. Theron Schutte, the superintendent of schools. Joining us via the miracle of technology is board president B. Niblock, and I am Sean Heitman. Would you all please join with me in reading the mission statement for the school district? We develop learners who have the knowledge, skills, and positive mindset to successfully pursue a meaningful future through personalized learning experiences. And then stand as you're able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any changes to the agenda for tonight?
There are not.
With that, may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Faltis, Hernandez, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0. Mr. Sodders.
I'll actually cover the recognition, or this first recognition on the Career Tree sponsors. We're excited to announce that We've landed 13 local business sponsors to help us launch our career tree graphics that'll go up in the high school, MLA, and Miller Middle School. The 13 sponsors of the career trees are Alliant Energy, Buena Vista University, Construct, Emerson, Great Western Bank, Iowa National Guard, KDAO, Marshtown Area Chamber of Commerce, Hospitality and Tourism, Marshall County Farm Bureau, Mecdyne, Moore, McKibben, Goodman, and Lorenz, Raycom, and Unity Point. So we'll be creating graphics here fairly soon that will illustrate the jobs and careers that are available within 13 respective career pathways. And then I should also mention that Marshtown Community College and Iowa Valley Community College District are also in partnership with us. And so similar to the modular tech lab at the middle school, we wanted to make sure that our kids, as well as their parents and our employees, knew as they looked at and explored these various career pathways that there's local businesses that accommodate those jobs and careers here, and wanted them to make a mental connection to that, because so many of our kids do hope at some point, whether it's right away or later in life, to return and be close to family. So we wanted to make sure that they're aware that there's great jobs right here in Marshalltown.
Great. Amy, I lost my internet connection, so I can't look at the agenda at the moment.
Okay.
But I will open the public hearing on the Lanahan AV project. I know, Dr. Schutte, you had a couple of comments you wanted to make on that. I don't know if there's anybody else here, if any comments were received. Paulette?
I received no comments.
Yeah, so just as a recap, the Lanahan project includes purchasing and implementing audio-visual in each of the core classrooms or main classrooms within the facility. So the audio part of it would be similar to the implementations that we've done at all 6 elementary schools thus far. The video part would be a new piece, which has really been prompted by what we've experienced this past year with COVID. So we thought it would be a great opportunity to pilot having the technology available to actually beam classrooms over the internet and that sort of thing. And then the third piece to that is a replacement of the existing intercom system with a new intercom system that'll be more reliable and consistent for communications throughout the building. So essentially that's what that project entails.
Okay, and with that, we will close the public hearing. So then we should be at the consent agenda. We have minutes from our last board meeting. Are there any changes or corrections that need to be made there? Any items of note in personnel, Dr. Schutte?
Yeah, we have 2 retirements on tonight's agenda, 2 longtime Marshtown employees. Doug Bacon has been with the school district since 1995 as a teacher and a coach. Although he's been extensively involved in coaching, it's never been about the money or accolades. He's one of the most humble people known at the high school. Teaching to him has always been more than just what happens in the classroom. He has seen to it the students that have had a need for running shoes, clothes, physicals, food, incidentals, got those things if they needed them. In his career, he's coached softball, football, track and field, and cross country. The number of state champion events he has coached is 27 events, but he's been just as proud of the athletes that have exceeded their abilities and did it the right way. He has had 7 top 10 finishes at the state track and field meet, and as a team finished runner-up twice. He plans to spend more time with his family and also restoring his 1968 Mustang. So we want to thank him for his nearly 30 years of service to the district. And also Gary Mertens from the high school. He had taught 7 years in Tucson, Arizona before coming to MHS. Started out as a language arts teacher for the district in January of '94. In 2008, he began his duties as supervisor of the Success Center, which we now call the Academic Success Center at the high school. He spent many years as a patient adult in the car with students learning to drive and driver's education. He has a wealth of knowledge. He's a team player and truly one of the greatest and most valuable assets that MHS has had. He's always willing to do whatever it takes to help students succeed and go the extra mile for every student he works with. At the high school, they call it Mertens Magic because what he gives to our students and staff is nothing short of magical. His short talks will be truly missed, and he will leave some very big shoes to fill at MHS.
Thank you. Looking into interagency agreements and contracts, there is change order number 3 for the tennis complex. Has 2 proposal requests and the remaining contingency allowance, all in the amount of $3,456.28. There's a proposal from Garling Construction to construct or install the rock climbing wall purchased last year from Okoboji. And a renewal for Power School for 14 months to start along with Smart Find Express in the amount of $21,619.20. Questions about any of those items? Open enrollments, we have 1 in, continuation for the remainder of this year, and next year, 3 in and 7 out. Paulette, anything of note in bills or in the monthly financials? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
McGinnis, Faltis, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0. Anybody on the public comment?
No.
Okay. And we're up to Mr. Manus, Mr. Holmgren, Dr. Jurgensen.
Good evening. We are here tonight to visit with you about the Ladders to Learning program. I'm going to give you just a little background. Thanks, Amy.
Pull that close, Tim.
We are here tonight to visit with you about the Ladders to Learning program and how we have gotten to the point that we are at. Throughout the pandemic, we have had administrative conversations about our concern about the lost instructional time for students. And at a admin meeting, I think back in January, Dr. Schutte presented us with some questions around what we could do to help support students. Mr. Manus, Dr. Jurgensen, and I all have experience with the Ladders to Learning program from a previous time that we used it for tutoring students. We feel like this is a great way to provide small group targeted instruction for students using the talented teachers that we have. Mr. Manus is going to talk a little bit about the students, and Dr. Jurgensen will talk a little bit about the staffing. Do you have any questions for me just about our general Ladders to Learning or? Okay.
So when we're looking at the kids, as Tim said, it's very targeted. Oh, why don't you grab that mic? Okay, never mind. musical chairs. So as we said, we're going to, it's targeted intervention, so to make sure that a targeted intervention is effective, you have to limit the group. So what we're doing are groups of 1 to 3 students. These 3 students we've looked at their winter FAST scores, either in math or literacy, sometimes SEL, looking at a couple of groups like that. And we've grouped these kids based on having the same need, the same intervention. Maybe these 3 kids had trouble multiplying 2-digit numbers, et cetera. So those 3 kids will be working on with the same interventions during their time. The kids will be tutored by one of our teachers for 8 45-minute sessions for a total of 6 hours of tutoring. Obviously, it's pretty intensive tutoring, being just 3 kids. We focused on what we call the yellow band kids this year. So when we look at our data wall, our yellow band kids are the kids that are close to benchmark, or maybe they've been at benchmark and they keep going back and forth. So what we're trying to do is to give those kids the skills they need to improve this year. Targeted, not completely, but mostly on our 3rd and 4th graders this year. We're trying to give them a heads up because, obviously they lost a lot of school last year. This year's been weird, so we're trying to give them some of the tools they need to be ready for their ISASS coming up in April. So kind of part of the timing on starting it now, we've got just enough time to probably get close to completing a full session with each group. Now, like I said, we're basing the grouping on their FAST scores from the winter. So using both math and literacy from the winter for those pieces. The teachers are putting together pre and post assessments, plus any kind of formative assessment they would be doing during it to see if they need to be switching their instruction, et cetera, and see making sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck and we're helping our kids improve. Any questions on the students and how we're choosing those?
Not how you're choosing them. Give me a rough idea for numbers.
Right now, and these are rough. I don't have the Lanahan numbers yet, but as of now, we're probably 43 tutors and approximately 230 kids across the elementary buildings.
Okay.
Nice.
And that's primarily 3rd and 4th graders, you said?
Primarily. There are some 1st and 2nd grades because some schools may not have had as many kids in that yellow band in 3rd and 4th grade. So they're looking at those 1st and 2nd grade kids that may also need some pretty intensive help right now.
Is that just in-person kids, virtual kids?
Yeah, all of the tutoring will be in person.
Okay. But would virtual kids, if they needed it, be able to participate? The kids who are online learning?
Right, if it was possible to do it in person.
Okay.
Yeah, it was open to all of our kids. We looked at all of our scores that we had in each building, and I think for the most part we worked with our instructional coaches. So we sat down with our instructional coaches and started looking at our data walls and looking at those yellow band kids and started grouping them. And I know in my case, my coach was actually pretty instrumental in pulling out the exact intensive instruction they needed, so where the resources would be targeted.
Okay.
Ronnie, you said 8 weeks. Is that once a week, or is it going to be a couple of days a week?
It depends. It's got to be a total of 6 hours of tutoring.
Okay.
So it's 8 45-minute sessions. So some may do 2 a week, maybe, and we're working on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We limited it to those 3 days because Rex is working with us and doing a great job on getting transportation. So we wanted to limit his part right there. So yeah, 8 45-minute sessions when they can get them. We know that in a perfect world, all 3 kids show up every time, but we know that it's not a perfect world. So
it's a group of 3 kids?
At the most.
So it's very individualized?
Yep.
Very nice. And you answered my other question. Transportation will be provided?
If needed.
Nice.
And that's different
Happening
from
before and
the,
after school or during the school day?
It's after school.
Okay.
and when it was offered before, transportation wasn't able to be provided, so this will really help out with the equity piece as it relates to that.
Definitely.
Nice.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm glad all the questions have been asked before I got here. I'll share a little bit about the staffing piece of it. This program, in its original design, was designed for people who teach in Marshalltown, who know our curriculum, who know our assessments, and who generally know our kids. The idea was that we would be able to take advantage of those things that were in place. And so our staff, our teachers for this are our teachers. And so the premise is that we were looking to do this tutoring in doses. Different, it's kind of like you don't with a pill bottle, you don't take all the pills at once. You dose things out. And so the premise of the program was actually vetted to the Iowa Department of Education 13 years ago. And I wrote the application for the AEA at the time. And the AEA actually was our service provider back in that era, where this was the only face-to-face tutoring program available to our students in Marshalltown, back in the era where all the approved provider lists were created by the Department of Ed. So we, in just a number of years, provided tens of thousands of hours of direct face-to-face tutoring for kids in Marshalltown, and it was very successful. And actually led toward the model of Rogers University at one time for the academic piece. So the teachers, again, like was kind of mentioned, they must provide the service. They're going to be compensated based very similarly to taking on a coaching assignment. And we make sure that those services are rendered. There is no pay for no kids, so the teachers have to keep track, and if one student misses one, they have to make up that session with the kids. And so unless a child moves away or parents pull out, we ensure that each child receives the amount of instruction as designed with this program, which is really an advantage over simply paying by the hour, for example, with teachers, and kids may not be there kind of thing. There's a high motivation to encourage kids to attend by the tutors, and working with the parents in that process to ensure kids are participating and they're engaged. So, we get pretty good outcomes that way when we have eyeball to eyeball, and we're working on some identified gaps, and we're working with our curriculum. So it's a win-win for our kids and for our staff. It's very highly motivating for teachers to be a tutor. We once collected data on that very factor, and we had kind of an exit survey years ago, and that was the thing that was a resounding success. It was very motivating for teachers to tutor because they can see the difference they're making, they can monitor kids closely, they can pay attention to the errors kids may be making in this gap area and have kids practice perfectly. Rather than a larger group. So that's why it's very small numbers, it's very eyeball to eyeball, it's very much highly monitored, and we've had great success before, and we look forward to it again to benefit our students.
And I want to commend Dr. Jurgensen and Mr. Holmgren and Manus for taking the leadership amongst our elementary team and retooling the former Ladders to Learning program into L2L 2021. And, one of the challenges that we were faced with was knowing how hard and challenging a year it's been for teachers from a stress standpoint, from anxiety standpoint, from a safety standpoint, from going wire to wire with the kids, including, monitoring them for lunch and that sort of thing. So one of the things that we had to figure out was how to structure this program in a way, and this wouldn't happen without these three principals and the other four, including Lanahan, really championing it with their staff. So I'm excited to hear the numbers that you've presented, and I'm sure we'll look forward to hearing from you guys in 8 weeks when we have some data to show what kind of positive difference it made. And I think it'll help also springboard into the summer
school programming and some additional thoughts as to how we might be able to do things even beyond summer school to help make up for some of this loss. I think part of our thinking too was that, our third and fourth graders are close to, well, there's accountability on the ISASP, obviously, and then the other thing is they're getting ready to head to that next step at Lanahan. And we know that in terms of full recovery, it's going to take time. This isn't going to happen overnight or in 8 weeks or maybe even for some kids in a year. So trying to figure out how we can continue to provide supports both within the classroom as well as extra support to get kids back where they need to be towards proficiency. So I thank all three of you for leading this charge.
Dr. Schutte, is this like a pilot, or is this something that we're going to move forward?
Especially thank Dr. Schutte for his leadership in bringing back a program that we know worked.
Thank you.
So my question was, is this like a pilot, or is this something that we would like to continue over the fall, possibly next spring, or is it something that we're just doing now?
It's probably not a pilot because it's something that we've done before, but I would imagine that as we approach the conclusion of this session, we'll take a look at, what's worked, what could possibly be improved upon, and again, it might be something that we can carry into the summer in some way, shape, or form in addition to the summer school programming or in conjunction to it. And certainly it'd be something that we'd look to carry forward. We plan to use our ESSER funds to help support it, for which, especially in this most recent phase 2 of ESSER, I guess you would say, a high emphasis was placed on learning recovery and getting kids the types of supports that they need to get back on track. So that'll be our intention certainly throughout the duration of us having the funding to do that.
As Dr. Schutte said, an extraordinary program for extraordinary times. This isn't business as usual. We want to make sure that this generation of students has every opportunity to succeed.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Are we good? Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I think this one's you.
Yep, so the next agenda topic is a resolution for the board's consideration relative to the Marshtown Community School District withdrawing from the Central Iowa Metropolitan League, or the CIML, for extracurricular purposes, athletic particularly. The intent would be for us, along with 5 other districts representing 10 high schools, to form a new conference, name yet to be determined, for the 2022-2023 school year. So Mr. Isgrig primarily presented on this at the last board meeting, and so we're seeking board approval of this notice for me to be able to provide the CML on withdrawal. Our intent would be that all 6 districts by the end of this month will have had this resolution approved by their boards of education, and then we will be presenting that to the league commissioner of the CML.
Questions for Dr. Schutte? We've talked about this a couple of different times. I guess my own thought is that this is a good deal for our kids. It will help level the playing field a little bit for our kids. Maybe give us more opportunities to compete, maybe get more kids interested in competing. So I think, Dr. Schutte, you've done a tremendous job pushing this thing forward with the other districts involved, and I thank you for that. Anybody else have anything they want to say?
Nope, makes sense to me.
If not, is there a motion to approve the resolution requesting reorganization of the Central Iowa Metropolitan League and/or the formation of a new conference of schools to include Marshalltown High School.
Move for approval.
Second.
Hernandez, Faltis. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. The motion carries 5-0. You're up, ladies.
You girls may want to share that same mic when you speak.
Okay.
You can take it out of the holder there if you want.
Okay. The XOP blood drive is this week. Yeah. And it's being hosted by Mrs. Fritzell for volunteer hours. This is available to all the students over the age of 16 with parental consent. You can get volunteer hours out of this. I think XLP students are helping out with this. So it's run by them too.
Alright, so MVP is starting back up again. Because of COVID, we weren't able to get in the freshman classrooms sooner. But basically, it's a program led by upperclassmen, so like juniors and seniors, and we're guided by Mrs. Frohwein, and we are we give presentations to the freshmen, and basically just on real life scenarios and different ways to approach life and all the curveballs it throws at us. We're going to be coming into the classrooms again and helping them out.
All right, and then the Student Senate and the principals have decided and announced to the students this week that prom is on. So it's going to be April 24th, and the masks are going to be required except for when you're taking your pictures and then walking promenade. So it's going to be $10 per person this year, and then they're only allowing the MHS and MLA students to attend.
I think that, and it's just for juniors and seniors, right? Yeah.
So track and field began last week. Last week. And the first boys meet will be held on the 27th at Des Moines East High School, and the first girls meet will be held the 30th at Waukee.
Right, and for girls golf, their first practice was actually tonight. I don't know if it ended up happening because of the weather, but their first meet will be in Ankeny on April 13th.
I think they ended up having golf in the gym tonight to answer that question, but. So then soccer update. The girls' first practice would be the 22nd, so they'll be starting around, a week or two next week. And then their first match is going to be in Pella on the 5th of April. Then the boys, they started the 15th, so that was tonight, and I think that was also announced that it was in the gym. And then their first match is going to be held in Newton on April 1st. And that is all we have tonight. Any questions? Alrighty.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Dr. Schutte, is prom held at the high school? Normally. Auxiliary and gym.
I think auxiliary gym, and I think there's going to be some break times built in where they can, the kids can kind of step out of the gym, let the gym air out with the doors open.
Okay.
Paulette?
All right. It's hard to believe that we're talking about next year's budget already, but here we are. So tonight we want to talk about the certified budget for the 2021-2022 school year, which I will frequently refer to as FY22 or fiscal year 22. So there's two goals here tonight, and one of them is to publish an estimated consolidated expenditures for most of our district funds for the next school year. And the second piece of that is to establish a property tax rate for fiscal '22. This is a little bit different process than the line item budget process, which actually we won't do till late summer, early fall. But this certified budget process does become kind of the framework for our line item budget this fall. So certified enrollment is a really big piece of our certified budget. This is the primary driver of the funding that we receive, and you all recall that this last fall, our certified enrollment was down 88 students. So that means that typically you would have less funding because it's funding per student. While the legislature did approve a 2.4% increase in SSA for next year, due to the declining enrollment that we are experiencing, we actually, for next year, the board approved the use of the budget guarantee because that increase of 2.4% did not offset the decrease due to declining enrollment. So we're on the budget guarantee for next year, and that means that we'll only experience a 1% increase in new money rather than that 2.4%. For next year, our regular program district cost per pupil will be $7,238. So basically, you take the number of students that we have, which is just over 5,300, times the $7,238 to come up with your regular program funding. So we complete the aid and levy each spring in order to apply the Iowa School Foundation formula. This calculates how much of our funding is derived from state aid versus how much comes from local property taxes. So in order to understand that, it's important to note that tax rates are a function of the district's taxable valuation of property. We in Marshalltown have a low valuation per student, so those districts that have that will have higher tax rates than a district that has more property value behind the students. Due to the operation of the foundation formula, a majority of the district's tax rate is not subject to local decision. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more here shortly. So the next slide will just show you a history of the taxable valuation that we have behind each student, or not behind each student, the total taxable valuation in our district over the last several years. We have an average 2.5% growth, but this last year, for next year, we have just seen an increase in valuations of 0.72%. So it was a little bit less than average this year. This chart will also show you any amount that is set aside for the tax increment financing, or identified for tax increment financing. In Marshalltown School District, this went up from about 19 million to 27 million for fiscal 22. The next slide, thank you, Amy. This shows, these are numbers for this year. Marshalltown School District for this year has $211,000 of taxable valuation behind each student. We're a little below the average. We are 10th lowest in the state right now. There is one district in this state that actually has about 1.4 million of taxable valuation behind each student. But the average in the state is about 374,000. So again, this taxable valuation plays an important part in our tax rate. We also like to remember that we are only one taxing authority of several. So we take a look at some numbers, and these are specifically for residents of the city of Marshalltown. There are 7 different taxing authorities for residents of the city of Marshalltown. And so this will show you the breakdown between each taxing authority and over time. And you know, it's pretty common for taxing authorities to try to keep that tax rate as stable as possible unless there are certain circumstances that dictate needing a tax increase. And then before we dive into our numbers, I wanted to just remind everyone, I'm not going to go into these in detail, but there are several property tax relief provisions that assist districts such as ours with low taxable valuation per student. And what these provisions do is buy down that tax rate, that property tax rate for our taxpayers. There's 3 specific provisions, and if you slide to the next, or move to the next slide, Amy, this is a chart that shows for fiscal 22, for next year, what we are looking at is an estimated property tax relief for MCSD of about $2.59 per thousand. You can see over time that's up a little bit, but well over $2 per thousand to reduction to the local property tax rate by these different provisions. The next slide will show you MCSD's historical property tax rates by fund. Remember, we have 5 funds that receive property tax revenue. So when we talk about our property tax rate, we're talking about the rate that is combined for all of those funds. But here in this chart, you can see the breakdown between each of those funds. So there are a couple of funds, the Public Education and Recreation Levy and the Physical Plant and Equipment Levy. Those 2 funds are rate limited. So the code says you can only have up to 13.5% levy for Pearl, for example. So as you can imagine, if a district has a lot more valuation, that is going to generate more revenue at 13.5 cents than a district that doesn't have the valuation behind that. The management and debt service funds are use-limited funds. So very restrictive in that, for example, the management fund is used to pay for early retirement incentives, our property, casualty, and work comp, insurance premiums, and unemployment. And the debt service fund, of course, can only be used to pay principal and interest on debt. Does anybody have any questions on that before we talk specifically about our tax rates? Oh, I should point out, for this current fiscal year, fiscal 2021, our total tax rate is $18.34. And that has been stable for the last couple years.
Just a reminder that Pearl is a physical education and recreation levy. Those are at 13.5 cents per thousand is our funds that I think we're one of about 20 districts in the state that have this levy. We share those revenue proceeds with the city as far as their park and rec department, and they're really designed for either recreational programming, which is what Park and Rec use them for, or community use facilities. So we often use those funds to improve and enhance our playgrounds, for example. Or most recently, that's the funding source that we're looking to use for the Franklin Field bleacher demolition and increasing the footprint of the playground in turn. PEPL, physical plant and equipment levies, so these are facility funds, and they're used for either buildings and grounds type things, or they can be used also for equipment purchases such as technologies, similar use as the sales tax.
We use some of ours also for non-instructional software and all of our vehicle fleet, buses and such. So if you want to move to the next slide, Amy, please. So the Aiden levy is actually over 400 lines of formula, and as we said before, the majority of the tax rate is not subject to local discretion. There are basically 4 areas within the whole formula that the Board of Education has discretion to determine, what we're going to do. So I'm going to cover each of those areas, and the first one is the SBRC modified supplemental amount for dropout prevention. If you recall, back in December, you were presented with the proposed dropout prevention program budget for next school year, and at the time, we talked about wanting to keep that rate that was applicable to that program about the same. We didn't want to increase it, and we didn't want to decrease it. So what we needed in order to support that funding and what the board approved for next year was that $1.6 million. I'm going to skip down to the management fund line there, that $1.3 million. And as we just talked about, the management fund is use limited, so that is primarily covering our property casualty insurance, workers' comp, and early retirement. And we have been spending that fund balance down over the last couple years because it was kind of high. And so now we are at a point where we want to levy the revenue each year that we need to pay the expenses each year. So we need to levy about $1.3 million for the management fund. The cash reserve levies, there's 2 different pieces to that. You might also recall that in December, the board was asked to approve our SBRC application. And that's the first line there, that cash reserve levy SBRC, that $3.9 million. Now, it's a little bit, that cash reserve levy is to fund programs that we are already providing or that we have provided. So this is getting the cash to fund the authority that we have already asked for and already received. The other cash reserve levy is the line that we use when we talk about improving our solvency ratio. The district's solvency ratio has declined over the last several years, and so we have, in our 5-year projections, been strategically trying to increase that solvency ratio, which the board policy says should be at a minimum of 8%. So that is what we use to improve that solvency ratio. There is only 2 ways a district can improve their solvency ratio. That is either put on a cash reserve levy or reduce your expenditures. So the last portion of this is the instructional support program, and we've talked a lot about this over the last few months. In the past, the district has not had, or the board has not had, the option here to utilize an income surtax. So the instructional support program, as you recall, can be funded either 100% by property tax, or it can be funded by property tax and income surtax together. So the current resolution for the board expires on June 30th of 2021. And so this past spring, you probably remember that the board adopted a new resolution for a period of 5 years. And that resolution allows the board to utilize an income surtax if they decide to on an annual basis to fund part of that instructional support program. So if you go to the next slide, Amy. And I did print out the really tiny numbers so that you had them in front of you too. So in the past, and for this year, we have used a 0% income surtax. Our instructional support program is this year and has been funded entirely by property taxes. And that levy rate for the current year, or actually this is the levy rate estimated for next year, if the board decides to use a 0% income surtax, that would make the levy rate for that program $1.79 per thousand, and that would put the estimated total property tax rate at about $18.55. As we go across here, you can see that the 1% and the 2%, as you use income surtax dollars to fund a portion of that program, then the property tax portion obviously decreases. So at 1% surtax, the ISL rate would be $1.58, and that would keep our total property tax rate at about where it is right now. At a 2%, the rate would go down to $1.38 and would actually decrease the property tax rate down to $18.14 per thousand. Now we have 8% equals the max on there, because that percentage can change year to year. The board decides what income surtax percent to use on an annual basis. So if you decide to use, say 6% this year, that doesn't mean that you have to use 6% next year. But because this program has to have at least $1 property tax paying for it, the most income surtax that we could put on currently for fiscal '22 would be 8%. And that would shift a whole lot, almost $2 million to surtax from property tax. That is not a recommendation. I just wanted to put that on there so that you understand that this is an annual decision. It could change from year to year, but there is a calculated maximum. So, and you might be asking yourself, why are we considering this? Well, property taxes are regressive in that they take a larger percentage of income from low-income groups than from high-income groups. Income taxes are progressive, that they take a larger percentage of income from high-income groups than from low-income groups. If you remember with the income surtax option, This is a tax on your Iowa tax liability on a personal income tax return. So if someone has no tax liability on their Iowa income tax return, they owe no income surtaxes. Does anybody have any questions so far on income surtax?
And just as a reminder, we're the only Marshall County school not to currently have an income surtax, I believe.
That is correct. So the next slide kind of talks more about the numbers behind our cash reserve levies. So I have here for the last 3 years, but for fiscal '22, you may recall that this past fall, the board was presented with and approved the special education deficit for last school year, which was $2.3 million. We've also approved ELL programming for students beyond 5 years. So that programming costs just over $1 million. And then we had some open and roll out that weren't on the prior year count of 537. So the authority that the district has been granted, that we are now asking now getting the cash to support those programs, is about $3.9 million. And then again, this cash for the solvency ratio is just under $1 million. If we go to the next slide, this will show you the breakdown of the general fund only. As I said, there's 5 funds that receive property taxes, but obviously the general fund or our operating fund receives well in excess of 80% of those property taxes. So this is the biggest piece of the property tax rate. And this just shows you the breakdown between the uniform levy, which every school district has a uniform levy of $5.40 per thousand. The additional levy, which is what comes after the state aid kicks in to get us to 87.5%, then the additional levy kicks in. Third line there is the budget guarantee, as we talked about and as the board approved last board meeting. We are on the budget guarantee, and so that equates to just over $100,000 for fiscal '22. Our dropout prevention program, our cash reserve levy, and an instructional support levy, that would total about $18.4 million in property taxes, or about $15.92 for fiscal '22. And then it has, of course, the change from '21 to '22 there also. The next slide is what we are actually required, and what you will direct me to do is to publish our proposed budget with an estimated property tax rate on there. So what I have put before you is 3 different scenarios. The first one with 0% on it is actually using no income surtax to support the ISL program. It would be 100% property taxes. The one with the 1% on it would be a 1% income surtax, and the page with 2% on it, cleverly, would be a 2% income surtax. So this is how we are required to publish our proposed budget. And what this document does is it shows the actual numbers from 2020, last school year, and then we look at this year's budget and we re-estimate what we think we are going to spend in this year, And then we project out what we are going to spend in fiscal '22. And remember, this format puts all those funds together and doesn't identify between the general fund, the management fund, and all the other funds that we deal with. So we are certifying that we will spend in 4 different functional areas, and those 4 areas are highlighted on that form. So we have the functional area of instruction, we have total support services, non-instructional programs, and then the other expenditures, which is your facility acquisition and your debt service. So we are saying that we are not going to spend more than what we have proposed on these lines in each of those areas. The next slide, Amy, comes up to exactly the same numbers, but it shows it in a different format, one that you're more accustomed to seeing, whereas we've broken it out by fund. And I did include, I don't usually include the current year in there, but I did this time around because there's some things happening in this year that are COVID related, and I thought it important to just point out, we are getting some federal funding, and so the next item on the agenda is actually going to be an amendment, because we didn't plan to spend the funding a year ago that we didn't know we weren't going to get. So our revenues are going to be up more than we expected, as will our expenditures. You can see by this view that there are some funds, there are a couple of funds, particularly our activity fund and our nutrition fund, that their ending fund balances, their estimated fund balances at the end of this year are going to be significantly lower, and those are both due entirely to COVID and the pandemic. Obviously, in the activity fund, we didn't have a lot of revenue that we would normally have had we been open. So what we're going to have to do in those funds is try to build some of those balances back up over time. So while we are estimating that the activity fund will have $90,000 going into '22, you can see that we have more revenue coming in than we have budgeted to expend to try and build those balances back up. And then I will absolutely tell you with the general fund, I'm just planning, we're going to have to amend again next year because we have ESSER 3 coming, and we don't really know exactly what that number is yet, nor do we know whether we're going to spend it over 2 years, over 1 year, in a month, whatever. So we just are planning on having to amend again for next year. Does anybody have any questions on the funds? What we are proposing on each of these is that we are we have revenues of about $83.5 million for next year and expenditures of about $87.7 million for next year. So what I am looking for from you is your thoughts and directions on what you would like to do with the use of an income surtax. If you are interested in using the income surtax for next year, and then I will publish the proposed budget accordingly. And then at our next board meeting, we'll have a public hearing on that budget. And then following that public hearing, is when you would consider approving it.
I would like us to move some things to an income surtax because when I did my infamous door knocking, that was something that did come up. As a concern among people living in Marshalltown and especially among the elderly populations. That property taxes were going up and these are people who have paid off their homes and need to keep their expenses stable. So this would be one way to help them know that we are listening to their concerns. It's not going to make a huge difference in the property tax, I was just figuring that out, but it does send the message that we are listening.
So the Finance Committee met last week, Paulette?
Yes.
Last week, that was me, Mike, and B was there as well. And I guess the general consensus from that meeting was that a 2% income surtax would be something that the Finance Committee would recommend. Is that a fair characterization, B?
Yes. And I think that recommendation was made for a number of reasons. One being a progressive tax at the income surtax, and the other being that shifting 2% to income surtax takes a larger portion away from property tax and a property tax relief.
Yep. Other thoughts, questions from anybody?
I would move that the certified budget utilize 2% income surtax and the rest to be of the asking come from property tax, and that we set a public hearing for Monday, April 5th at 5 p.m.
You need a second? Seconded?
Niblock, McGinnis, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, and then the next item is, as previously mentioned, we need to set a public hearing and consider adopting the amendment for our current year budget. We are amending in 3 of the 4 functional areas. Instruction and total support services would be amended for COVID-related reasons. And then the other expenditures is being amended, needs to be amended because of our HVAC projects that we didn't know we were going to be doing a year ago. So I would just need a motion to publish and set the public hearing for April 5th at 5 o'clock.
So moved.
Second.
Niblock, Faltis, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The motion carries 5-0.
Okay, and the next agenda item is the recommendation for the fiscal 22 health and dental plans. And we have not quite 2 years of data since we made some major plan design changes, but as of right now, the trend is improving, and we are pleased with the progress that we're making. The plan design changes have created positive consumer incentives and changes in behavior, so that was good to see also. So for the fiscal 22 plan year, there are several things that Wellmark is requiring for their fully insured groups. And they're actually enhancements, and so our recommendation would be to adopt those same enhancements as the fully insured groups are required to have, and they are listed there, which does include a longer period for dental treatment, marriage counseling, longer skilled nursing facility coverage, and then a couple of specialty or pharmacy tiers that would be added. We are also recommending adding coverage for preventative 3D mammography with no cost share to members. This has been an issue that some of our employees have come back to us with, concerned about that. So that will be a slight change that we would like to recommend. As far as the pharmacy, the prescription plan, we would recommend changing from a Blue RX formulary to a Value Plus formulary, which removes Tier 4, but we also want to recommend honoring any prior authorizations for Tier 4 drugs. We would recommend reducing the Doctors on Demand visit copay on the HMO plan from 20 to 10 to incent more of that utilization. And then most importantly, we would like to hold the rates and the premium cost sharing stable for both the health and the dental plans for fiscal '22. And so we have an insurance advisory committee that has met twice, once in January, once in February, I think. And our benefits consultants provided information to this committee about how our plan is currently running, what our numbers look like, and then presented several different incremental changes that we will continue to look at and evaluate over time. But for next year, we decided, and the committee was supportive of just making a couple of small incremental changes in order to keep that rate steady and not do anything drastic at this time. You know, we also would like to have some more time to evaluate the impact of COVID on our plan, and hopefully get out of the pandemic and move forward. So those would be our recommendations. Darren, what did I miss?
I think you got it.
Yeah, I think I've been at all of those meetings with the Insurance Advisory Committee, and I think it's almost overwhelmingly good news from our insurance advisors. So I think if we're able to hold premiums steady and not change any of the cost sharing, I think that's a great deal for the district and for employees. It shows the hard work that's been done to make the plan more sustainable. So. If there's any other questions or comments, if not, is there a motion to approve the health design plan changes as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Baltus Hernandez, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries 5-0. Are you coming up, Todd?
Yeah, Todd can come in case there's any questions. We've got 3 resolutions before you for proposed summer projects, construction projects that we wish to go out to bid on. The first of which would be a resolution approving and adopting the plan specs, former contract and estimated costs for the Lanahan AV intercom upgrade project so that we can go out to bid for that. We had the public hearing for it earlier.
Are there questions for Dr. Schutte or for Todd about the Lanahan project?
Move for approval.
Second.
Niblock Faltus, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0.
The second resolution is to tentatively approve the plan specs, form a contract, estimated cost for the high school pool ceiling and lighting project, and setting the time, date, and location for the hearing, which should be proposed to be on April 5th. You may recall this was an alternate that we did not approve. It was the only thing we did not approve of the high school and Anson projects. We just didn't feel like the cost was appropriate, so we rejected that alternate and had FEH and KCL go back to the drawing board to redraft the project so that we could get more favorable bids. Essentially, they took some of the aesthetic portion of the project out to focus on the retrofitting of the lighting in the pool ceiling.
Questions for Dr. Schutte or Todd?
Move for approval.
So moved.
Niblick, McGinnis, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0.
And the third resolution would be for the deconstruction or the raising of the Franklin Field bleachers. And so we would be looking at an approval for the plan spec, form a contract, estimated cost, and setting a public hearing also for April 5th on this particular project.
Questions about this one? Not, is there a motion?
So moved.
Baltus Hernandez, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0. April 5th is going to be a busy meeting. Okay, we are up to policies.
Well, Board Director Miller will be disappointed that he missed a meeting that had such few policies on it. So we had two policies that came back for first reading. One is 302.4 Superintendent Duties that B had. We have not made any changes to that since you last saw the recommended adjustments. And then the second policy was 302.5 Superintendent Evaluation. Similarly, we had made adjustments in terms of making sure that these policies were similar in nature to the IASB policies, as well as included the legal provisions of Code 279.2. So I would recommend the board approve the first reading of these and waive the second reading.
May I have a motion to, I guess, are there any questions about either one of those? May I have a motion to adopt or amend, I don't know, to adopt 302.4 and 302.5 and waive the second reading?
So moved.
Second.
Niblick, Faltis, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. They are adopted.
Okay, so now it's me. I have 4 of them. If you can hear me. The first one is just a renumbering of 301.3 into 303.3, and we can mark it as reviewed.
Okay.
The second one is 302.2. We're also, well, we're combining 2 policies on this one with some language changes, and it will become the new 303.2. I would also recommend we mark that as reviewed. And then,
So on that one, we're combining what is old 302.3? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, we're combining 302.2 and 302. 302.3, we really haven't made any.
But I was going to say, there aren't any changes to the language,
There are no
right?
changes to the language, yeah.
Okay. And I think unless somebody has a problem with that, we can mark that as reviewed then.
That makes sense.
And then 302.3, delete that as a result.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the new policy, 303.1, there's, just use the ISB policy with the administrative positions taken from the Iowa Code 279.23, and that will come back at
Yep.
the next meeting.
303.1 will come back. May I have a motion to delete 302.3?
So moved.
Second.
McGinnis, Faltis, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. It is deleted. Okay. Mr. Sodders.
It's kind of incredible, there's daylight outside when I'm coming up here. Can't remember, seems like forever ago. So the only update I have tonight for the communications audit, we have settled on the week of April 5th through 9th to perform the focus group processes. So obviously staff have the 5th and the 6th of that week off currently. However, there are many external groups that we also will be doing focus groups for. So they would be able to potentially perform their focus group sessions, the 1-hour virtual sessions, on the 5th and 6th, as well as the other 3 days of that week. So we're looking forward to that. Invites are currently set to go out either Friday or Saturday right now. And so we're excited to get going with that. We're still finalizing the guest list, so to speak, and still receiving feedback from folks about what time slots work best across the different groups right now. And that is all I have. Did you have any questions?
You have questions for Adam? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Looking at reminders, there's an MBEA meeting this week. That's Nico and B. There's a finance committee meeting also this week. The SIAC committee is meeting in a couple of weeks. And then remember, we've got the National School Board Association virtual conference coming up in April. And I know B's excited. There's an MHS Community Auditorium Foundation meeting that's rapidly approaching, B.
I'm excited.
See? I get to do, there's a LAO committee meeting also coming up in May. I have policies for next week, or our next meeting in April. Committee reports, I talked about the Finance Committee. We pretty much just talked about the budget. Dr. Schutte, anything on ACER?
Yeah, and B, feel free to help me with ACER since I forgot to bring my notes, but I think a general theme that was talked about across county, city, and school district and the college were upcoming or continuing construction projects. The county talked about how things are proceeding with the second roof replacement now at the courthouse. I think the biggest thing was what has been in the news as of recent in terms of them being in a position of seeking to fill the position of sheriff, as well as now county attorney, with Jennifer Miller moving towards a judgeship. And today was a big day for the city with the open house and unveiling of the Coliseum. That's being completed now, so that was an exciting event to be involved with. They talked a little bit about the work that continues with the downtown plan improvements and future projects there, and Mayor Greer talked about his excitement over prospects for continued increased housing and residencies within the community. Big news was released by the Chamber of Commerce with the announcement that Lynn Oberding will be resigning her position in order to relocate their family relative to her husband's job change. And so we'll definitely miss her partnership, and we'll eagerly look forward to who replaces her. Amy Piper from Iowa State University Extension talked about both the challenges and the opportunities that COVID has presented them, similar to school districts and other entities working with youth, and they're very excited to hear that we'll be offering in-person summer school, and she's working with Micah to figure out how their programming can work in conjunction with that as well. Other things of note, B?
Nope, everybody seemed to be pretty happy that Mayor Greer was hanging on to the mask mandate for a while.
Yeah.
Does anybody have anything for future agendas?
Yes, thank you, Sean. I had basically three things. Two of them are kind of leftovers from door knocking concerns, and the other one involves dyslexia.
Jan, can you speak into the mic?
I have three things I'd like to see us address, but not on April 5th. It looks like you have a pretty full meeting, but sometime before the start of the next school year. One of them involves our language learners. When I was at the LAO committee meeting a while back, and they don't meet very often, it looked as though our language learners were not making a lot of progress. So I'd like an update on what's happening with that. What kind of data do we have? What have we put into place to try to correct this situation, and what is it working? The other one involves dyslexia. With the new regulations, one of the expectations is that we will not refer students for special education services in reading until we have tried and have implemented with fidelity a structured literacy intervention. And I know the school had purchased System 44 and Really Great Reading, because that was brought up. But of course, with COVID, it's been difficult to do that the way they were designed. So where do we stand on that? And are these programs working when they are implemented? And what's going to be our fallback plan if we're not going to refer kids to special education and we've not been able to implement these plans? And then when I knocked doors, there had been some changes made in the XLP programs, and parents were concerned about that. And I talked to Theron about it. I guess I'd like to know how the parents are feeling at this time. I haven't heard anything more about it, if they're more comfortable with the changes now that it's been in place for a year.
Okay. Anybody else have anything?
Could I ask Jan to send me a copy as long as I could not hear what she said?
Yes, I'll have to edit it, but yes, I will.
Thank you.
Okay. B, do you have a quote for tonight?
I don't.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I have lots of quotes, but none that I can use in this instance.
Okay. Then we just need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Biblock Faltus, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say no.